Hey there, Hetty here. I thought I'd take a break from digging myself out of the snow and now freezing rain, conspiring to barricade me in my flat, to put together a video about a few concepts that have no place in my practice. I love watching videos like these from other people in the community. They provide a really pretty personal peek into others' practices, values, and thought processes. There's something about knowing that widely held opinions, which may often be framed as rules, particularly to new explorers, aren't nearly so universally applicable as they sometimes seem. And conversations around the topic of what one doesn't hold dear tend to get the creative juices flowing and help nail down one's perspectives, or at least help them understand maybe their instinctual responses, particularly when those responses are negative. So, with that bit of foreshadowing out of the way, what concepts have no place in my own practice? Well, here's 3 of them. Up first, the law of return. Whether framed as westernized karma or the idea that what you put out comes back times 3, I just don't subscribe to the existence of any such rule. My reasons are the typical law discussed at length by many others before me, including the fact that bad things happen to good people, that good things happen to absolute scum, that while putting positivity out there certainly improves the odds of being treated positively, it's not a defense against drunk drivers mowing you down on a crosswalk. We will all do good things that don't contribute anything good to the world in the end, and may even do the opposite. And we will all escape the repercussions of our own shitty behavior once or twice. And I tend to think that what personal tolls and benefits come of each depends very little on any objective measures of right and wrong. In general, I think that the law of return is more useful as a practical reminder than it is as a reference to any independent universal force. At least framed this way, it serves as encouragement to recall that most of what we do has consequences, and that it's prudent to think about what some of those consequences, especially the potential unintended ones, may be before acting. For instance, the hex cast in anger may ultimately make us feel like a shitty person even if nothing else comes of it, an outcome whose explanation requires nothing more than a passing familiarity with one's own propensity for guilt, and whose prediction would have been guaranteed if we'd taken a hot second to review that fact in light of our principles before firing off a shot. And perhaps in this sense that we reap psychologically what nasties we sow, the law of return can be framed as a general rule. But still, the breadth of any such truism's applicability is probably narrower than we'd like to believe, because it depends upon a universality of morals, ethics, and capacity for empathy that sadly just doesn't exist. Next up, on things I don't include in my practice, secret names. I used to have one I selected with great care and in absolute seriousness when I was like 12. And only I and my one other craft-curious friend knew it. We had matching ritual gowns and everything, sewn by hand by my extremely Catholic grandmother, who no doubt thought that they were for some sort of dress-up game. Mine had a red ribbon, hers a yellow one. We each had our own elements, obviously, and we wore them while practicing the ritual of the lesser pentagram in between bouts of headbanging to Metallica. And part of me still kind of likes the idea of a name used exclusively for the purpose of ritual. Having one was romantic, exciting in a sexy secret sort of way, empowering. And I have no difficulty seeing today the advantages from the standpoint of mind frame, associations, and a whole host of other rationales for why it does remain a popular practice even among strictly solitary witches. So I don't mean to make light of the idea as a practice just the way I was executing it, which was ridiculous. However, it just never really worked for me. Never felt like the name was mine. I think sometimes people leave behind or feel like they leave behind their ritual names because they feel like they've outgrown them. But in my case, I think it was just that I reached a point where I'd grown into my birth name until it fit so snugly that no other name would do. Not for Circle anyway. YouTube's obviously a different story. And for that reason, it just isn't part of my practice. And now we come lastly, probably most contentiously, number 3 on today's list of concepts that have no place in my practice: magic. Thought I'd pause there for a second so as not to interrupt the internal booing that's no doubt going on out there somewhere. But hang with me for another little bit before writing me off. Obviously, I identify as a witch, and I go on at great length and occasionally excruciating detail about spellcraft. So disowning the term magic might seem pretty odd at first glance. Fair enough, so I'll try to explain my thinking, which is this. My issue with the term magic, and the reason it isn't something I subscribe to, is that I really have no idea what magic is even supposed to be in the context of real-world witchcraft. And so would have no idea how to include this uber fuzzy idea in what I do, even if I did one day decide that I wanted to. I've read many of the same books as a lot of you. I came up in the 90s Wicca boom right alongside a lot of you too. And so I also will have the go-to definitions of magic from those tomes inscribed on the inside of my eyelids until they're at long last eaten by worms. Magic is the application of will to effect change. Magic is just a means of evoking change using rules and phenomena we don't quite understand. Magic is just a science we haven't discovered yet. Magic is simply something related to quantum mechanics that sounds suspiciously like bullshit. I probably read the Magic is an Undiscovered Scientific Principle one for the first time in like 1995. And looking back, I've now got to ask, did this apply to RNA interference too? Was it magic until Fire and Mellow published in 98? Or did it cease being magic about a year earlier while they were still running their controls and when only a handful of people in their labs knew about it? Is it still magic among those people who don't realize it's been formally defined and many, although by no means all aspects, are sort of kind of understood? Does magic just mean whatever isn't defined? And does that then mean that once we have a catchier word for a thing, magic inherently becomes an outdated term for it? RNA interference, or RNAi as the cool nerds call it, impinged on seeming cause-effect relationships we thought we had a decent handle of. It did so in strange and unpredictable ways, but with an odd sort of consistency. It was an astoundingly far-reaching phenomenon that had always surrounded us, and that we'd been fucking around with utterly unbeknownst to us and in perfect ignorance of how we achieved the weird-ass things we were doing. Some people had an inkling that there was something meaningful going on, that they couldn't quite put their finger on, and engaged in various trials, tweaking this, seeing what happened when they did that, to try to get a sense of what the hell was up, so that they might use this mysterious power to their own ends. A lot of people figured the strange effects related to RNAi were just flukes or mistakes, the vagaries of chance and fate and sloppy lab work. And gosh, doesn't a lot of that sound like how many people use the term magic to you? It does to me. It also sounds exactly like what people in my field call experimentation and research. 20 years and a Nobel Prize later, RNAi is the foundation of a ton of scientific work, and it's really no different than it was in 1995. All that changed was our awareness of it, our understanding, and so our ability to examine and manipulate it. It was no more magic then than it is now, unless all magic means is something fucking fishy's going on. And so I put the question to you, what would RNAi have gained by being labeled magic instead of what the fuck? What would naming its effects so have done for those grasping for the reasons behind what it manifested? It might seem like I'm fishing for a particular answer confirming that I am, in fact, brilliant and right in all things. But that's not it. That's my answer. No. I would tend to say that calling it magic wouldn't have been beneficial or any more accurate than calling it what the fuck. But that doesn't mean I think it should necessarily be your answer. What we call things shapes how we think about them, shapes how we perceive all that's related to them, how we decide what's related to them, and how those things interact with other things in turn. And so in asking the question, what I'm really implying is that words have power, but we each have different power lexicons, and that there's a certain benefit to discovering what words are part of yours and how and why they may have become so, and what words aren't or shouldn't be because they don't work. Magic just isn't part of my own lexicon. But then, going back to our earlier and various definitions, I have other words that haul the same weight and that convey the same ideas, which I use instead. Magic as the application of will, I just cut out the middleman and call it good old will, which I find both less cumbersome and more to the point. I can and do use even more specific terms for particular acts of will in my practice, too. I just don't group them together under a single and, in my hands, unwieldy umbrella of magic. Magic as an incomplete understanding of physical laws that we can make use of. Friends, an incomplete understanding of a complex system that I'm pretty positive exists and obeys laws I don't fully understand but try to screw around with anyway is just Tuesday. By which I mean it's a definition that fits just as well to my work as it does my practice. It's literally everything I do, and frankly, it probably applies to a lot of what you do too. And yet, we'd probably all agree, or at least we'd probably dearly hope, that I don't consider the two processes identical or interchangeable. Just like you probably do a lot of things that fit that definition that are still wildly distinct from spellcraft, from witchcraft, from your practice. And so, none of these definitions of magic, nor any of the others I've encountered, speak to me of anything but the difficulty of nailing down a definition for the word magic. Now, clearly, or hopefully clearly, I don't disdain other people using the word, even those of you for whom the definition is as fuzzy as it is for me. We all use verbal shorthand, and I don't think less of anybody else for doing so in this case. But I found that when I hear it, I seem to automatically do one of two things. The first is remove it from the sentence altogether. I cast a magic circle becomes I cast a circle. I called upon the magic of my ancestors becomes I called upon my ancestors. A magic spell is a spell. One's magical practice is their practice. And I don't know about you, but for me, no informational content is lost in any of these cases as a result, because having the magic in there added nothing for me to begin with. The second way my mind deals with the word magic is to replace it with my preferred nomenclature. I did some magic tonight is, to me, I engaged in witchcraft, a term I like better because it describes an act, a practice that marries behavior and intent. It's solid and precise, and wrapped up in it is already the implication that it incorporates a fuzzy unknown, the non-mundane, and difficult to explain. Magic words are words of power, or please and thank you when at Sunday dinner with my mom because she finds chanted invocations at the dining table off-putting. And so this is why, if you've watched many of my videos, you've heard me use words like spell or craft or witchcraft, or possibly not the word witchery, but that's a good one and I should use it more often, ad nauseum. But you've almost certainly never heard me evoke the term magic in reference to my practice, because I can't quite figure out what magic in the context of witchcraft is supposed to mean, or how it defines anything that I've done or seen better than the myriad other words that I do use. At best, it strikes me as a catch-all phrase that's so broad as to be useless, for a catch-all idea that is that too. And so, on that note, I'll bid you adieu. Until next time, a most magical day to you all.